This is our first tool in our Good Together Marriage series, and this tool is going to explore the ways that our family culture influences what we think, what we believe, and how we even act in our marriages. So in the prologue, we talked about how God is the author of this grand narrative story, how He is the Lord and He has the authority not only to define the whole world, but to define marriage itself. But so often what we realize is that we each bring things into our marriage that are going to influence and affect us. And oftentimes those things are unexamined. We don't even realize. Pete Scazzero is an author who we like. He's written a whole series of books, the Emotionally Healthy series, and this concept is in his book, The Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. And he teaches that in order for us to move forward, we often have to look back. That even in Scripture, God talks to us about the blessings and the sins of our families have impacted the third and fourth generation. And so we have to recognize the beliefs, the lies, the destructive patterns that we bring into marriage, because they're often the air we breathe, so to speak, meaning they're things we don't even recognize because they're just our norm. I don't know how many of you in marriage have been in a position where you began to argue about something with your spouse and you said something like, well, this is just the right way to do it. This is just the way we have to do it. And they say, no, that's not how we have to do it. This is what I think is the right way to do it. And oftentimes what we're talking about as the right way is nothing more than just the way our families have always done it, what we thought was quote unquote normal. So Pete Scazzero has this great line. He says, you may have Jesus in your heart, but you have Grandpa in your bones. And our family loves to laugh about that quote because what he's talking about is realizing that if we are going to be followers of Christ, whose not only our behavior lines up with Jesus, but our heart attitudes, our beliefs about ourselves and the world and each other, if all those things are going to line up and be in agreement with who God is and who Jesus is, then we are going to have to recognize that oftentimes the things we bring from our family don't line up with what God says. So as believers, we want to rejoice in the fact that we've been adopted into a new family, but we also want to make sure that that adoption has, what I like to say is metabolized all the way through our system, and that the truth of what God says about us and the world is what we believe. And that means we've got to recognize what we believe and often challenge what we believe. So in order to discern some of those family patterns and beliefs, I've taken some questions that Pete Scazzero has and I've adopted them. Like I always do, and change them a little bit. And so I made a little worksheet for us to be able to go through questions. I do not think you need to go through these questions in one sitting. I think it would be an awful lot if you did. But I do think that you can take some of these questions, take 3 or 4 at a time and talk through them and allow them just to percolate and maybe even revisit them. I've divided it into several categories. There are questions about family, about conflict and how conflict is handled, about feelings, sexuality, and money and success. I'm sure there are more topics in this, and I'm sure that you have encountered ways that you and your spouse are very different in the way that you believe things that you've brought into marriage. This is just a jumping off place. It's not an exhaustive list, but what I hope it helps you do is recognize the water you swim in, recognize the air you breathe, recognize how your family history has shaped the beliefs that you had. Some of these questions might require that you spend the next couple of holidays with your family a little more quiet and a little more observant. I'm not asking you to go in and challenge your family. I'm not asking you to go in blaming and shaming anybody for the beliefs that you've brought into marriage that you now recognize may be harmful. What I am saying is we can be curious about where these beliefs come from and whether or not they really do line up with what God says. And so that might mean you ask questions of people in your family. That might mean you get real quiet and you just watch how things unfold. Some of the questions about family are about how different people play different roles. They're about generational themes like addictions, affairs, abuse, mental illness, those types of things. They're about family secrets. Oftentimes, families hold secrets, and those secrets are guarded so closely that we forget how those secrets hold power in the family. They're just about your family background. They're about the roles that different people in the family played. And so, again, these questions are just a jumping off place to be able to examine, how have I been influenced more by my family than I have been influenced by what God says? I hope that there will be some part of this that is fun. There's certainly parts of it that bring a lot of grief, a lot of sorrow, maybe even some anger. So I just caution you to be aware of how you're feeling. Don't push through that. Remember, our nervous system doesn't like to be bullied, but care for yourself in that. My two big words whenever I talk to people about encountering hard things in counseling are, can you be curious about not only what these patterns and beliefs are, but can you be curious about what's happening inside you when you talk about it? And then can you be kind? Can you be kind to yourself? Can you be kind to your spouse as you unpack these things, as you wrestle, and as you grieve? Because naming some of these things can often bring tremendous grief. I hope that didn't scare you off, and I hope that this will be not just a way to unpack and to get at what your family culture is, but I hope it'll be a way for you to begin to reckon with what you've brought into your marriage first, and then begin to think about the culture that you're creating in your marriage today and how you might want that to look more different as followers of Jesus. So this is our tool for Session 1, and each session we're bringing you more tools. We have a handout on this as we do for each one, and I hope that it's helpful.